Welcome everybody. This is Monk Chat night at Empty Cloud Monastery. It is Friday, December 6th, and we want to say hello to everybody out there. Richard, Joseph, Rick, Maria, Victoria, Ruchika, okay, and of course all the people here tonight at the monastery. So if you are interested in asking a question, feel free to just put it into the chat. Also people here at the monastery, if you have questions, you can raise your hand and then I'll try to answer things in some order. For those that don't know, my name is Bhante Jagaro. I'm visiting Empty Cloud. I'll be here for at least a few more days, and so it's been actually quite wonderful to be here and to join the community. And then I think the last time I was here was almost 2 years ago. So anyways, let's get started. So okay, so let's see if I can read this. Question for, oops, sorry, I can't, it's hard for me to see this, okay. Question, 4 kinds of kamma are found depending on the motivation. White, black, black and white, and neither black nor white. Could things like abortion and euthanasia be examples of black and white kamma? And then there's kind of a follow-up from Richard. And for example, Angulimala killing living beings would be an example of pure black kamma, but Angulimala stopping murdering would be an example of pure white kamma, right? Okay, so I don't recall the sutta. Maybe Richard, you might know the exact sutta where this comes from. They actually might have appeared in multiple places, but the Buddha talking about basically white kamma referring to wholesome and skillful conduct, black kamma referring to unwholesome and unskillful conduct, black and white kamma, this is the kamma that often we do when it's a mixed intentions. Yeah, there's some wholesome and skillful components and there's some unwholesome and unskillful components. And then, of course, neither black nor white kamma, and this refers to, from my understanding, the type of kamma that, for example, arahants engage in. I might be mistaken by that, but basically, things that don't sort of produce new results. So, could things like abortion and euthanasia be examples of black and white kamma? I think with a lot of things, it's always going to depend on the situation. But basically, like I said, it's going to depend on the motivation of the individual, what their intentions are, what they're trying to accomplish, and so. So I don't think you can categorically say, such things. I would say, though, that generally speaking, any sort, the Buddha called, if you look throughout the suttas, he doesn't give any sort of, how do you say, like, killing is okay, it's bad, but except for these circumstances. There's never a situation I recall seeing in the suttas, the Pali Canon, where the Buddha says something like that, abstain from killing except for such and such. So one reflection I've had about this is that our minds are very good about justifying things that it wants to do, yes, and so there's actually a very practical utility in the Buddha not giving any sort of, wiggle room around this, because our minds typically pick these things up and run away with it. Yeah. And so just keep that in mind. And of course, regarding Angulimala, I mean, this, of course, the story, this is my understanding. This might be some kind of commentarial influence on my understanding of the Angulimala story, but I recall hearing that he set out on this sort of journey to kill so many people, at least get the fingers, based on a sort of a request from a spiritual teacher that he had. It's basically sort of, he had so much faith in this spiritual teacher, and of course he just there wasn't enough other qualities to sort of say, hey, this isn't a good idea. Again, I'm reluctant to say that anything is pure black, pure white, or mixed, or neither. Just because so much depends on the state of mind of the individual. What you can do is you can look at your own mind when you're carrying out actions and get a sense of whether or not what the wholesome or skillful components are, and to get a sense for the unwholesome and unskillful parts, right? And the main point of, I think, that sutta is that if we commit acts that are wholesome and skillful, there'll be pleasant results, right? And then similarly, if we commit unwholesome, unskillful actions, there'll be unpleasant results. If we commit actions that contain both wholesome, skillful, and unwholesome, unskillful, there'll be sort of a mixed result, both pleasant and unpleasant. And then understanding that there's this Buddhist path eventually leads to an understanding in a way out of sort of kind of constantly producing kamma and the results of kamma. Okay, Joseph asks a question. Kind wishes, venerables, would you speak on these 5 qualities that prevent entrance into the first jhana? Stinginess with dwellings, families, material things, praise, and lack of gratitude and thankfulness. And the follow-up, sorry, I gotta make it bigger because I can't even see it. Oh gosh, I forget to see it. Okay. Avasamacharyang, kulamacharyang, labamacharyang, vanamacharyang, akatanyutang, akataveditam. Anguttara 5.264. What do these qualities mean to you? Why do they stop entrance into jhana? Okay. So why don't, I thought it would be useful while we're here, we can look at suttas together. Yeah. So let's look at the sutta a little more closely. Let's say Anguttara 5.264. I'm going to switch screens in a second. See if I can get to it. Okay, here we go. And so I'm using Sutta Central, but you can use other things if you have a copy of one of the Pali Canon translations, for example, by Bhikkhu Bodhi, or you can use, there's partial translations that access to insight. Any is fine. So let's see, 5.264. Okay. So it's not working. I reload the page. And 5.264. Is this it? 251. Okay. Oh, here we go. 264. Here we go. Another discourse on the first sutta. Okay, so look at Bhante Sujata's. Okay, so this is a short sutta. So let me read the whole sutta because I'll be educational. Okay. Mendicants, without giving up these 5 qualities, you can't enter and remain in the first absorption, the first jhana. What 5? Stinginess with dwellings, families, material things, praise, and lack of gratitude and thankfulness. Without giving up these 5 qualities, you can't enter and remain in the first absorption. But after giving up these 5 qualities, you can enter and remain in the first absorption. What 5? Stinginess with dwellings, families, material things, praise, and lack of gratitude and thankfulness. After giving up these 5 qualities, you can enter and remain in the first absorption. So that's a short sutta. And the question was basically, can you basically speak on this? Is there any kind of reflection of this? So one of the basic blockers, the things we are basically trying to you could say establish before we can have a mind that starts to become more peaceful, more at ease, more absorbed, more settled, is we need to work on the hindrances, right? And so, just even taking a step back from the hindrances, basically we can look at our mind being sort of caught up with sort of greed, right? Or kind of wanting something, hatred, or aversion, pushing something away, or delusion, basically just trying to kind of make up things or spin things into kind of confusion. So we kind of dole out, numb out, confuse ourselves out of suffering. Yeah. And basically, if you think about these 5 things that the Buddha is talking about, let's talk with stinginess with dwellings, for example. So maybe let's just take stinginess as just a general principle. So if one, for example, is likes to hoard things, all right, wants to keep everything for themselves, does not have a mind that wants to share, then that's a reflective of greed, yeah? So the mind is kind of preoccupied with wanting more, right? So if the mind is always wanting more, it's going to have a hard time, it's going to have a hard time with greed. It's usually, in the case of the 5 hindrances, probably caught up with things like sensual desire, or maybe kind of worry and doubt, perhaps. And so you can see how that's going to be a blocker, yeah? Families, it's kind of a similar thing, right? If somebody isn't able to say, hey, at some point, I have to walk away from the kind of my previous life of being with my family, attending to my family, taking care of my family, allowing others to pick up this role, having others look after them, right? Then the mind is going to be kind of constantly kind of intertwined, right? We might be kind of wanting something to be a certain way, or really fearful of things turning out a certain way. And so it's going to make it very difficult for the mind to settle, yeah? Material things, so kind of similarly, if instead of maybe our mind preoccupied with our families, maybe it's preoccupied with stuff, right? And you can very much imagine, even more than just for lay practitioners, but for monastics, sometimes people are very generous. Here at the monastery, as we're coming to the room, there's actually a whole bunch of offerings that were given to the monastic community. They're actually laying on the table. They're still being kind of sorted through. You can imagine, the mind is sort of caught up with things. It's like, wow, I really like, these robes over here and these bowls over here. And maybe I can, next year I can have some these color robes and maybe I can have a small bowl for this time of the year and a big bowl for this other time of the year, right? You start going from one bowl to 2 bowls to 10 bowls, right? So, even if you become a monk, you can still start to make large collections, right? Of course, as a lay people, we know that one of the kind of common things that lay people can pursuits is we can start to collect things, right? Collect cars, collect houses, whatever it is, So if our mind is in that realm, then, greed is going to be a very dominant quality. So praise. So if our mind is unwilling to let go of praise, then it basically means we're always going to be kind of very sensitive to the concerns of others, right? We don't want to make sure everybody likes us. We want to make sure everybody thinks we're doing great. And boy, that's, it's going to be, mind's going to be off into it with fear and aversion, or maybe it's greed for the pleasant feelings that come with praise. And maybe it's going to be a lot of kind of self-absorption, not in the kind of jhana sense, but the sense of like, wow, I'm so great, and that kind of stuff. So similarly, you can start to see how this can start to be a blocker, and then of course the lack of gratitude and thankfulness. This is something I think that if one is sort of doesn't have much of a sense of gratitude and thankfulness, then one's kind of worldview is very narrow, right? And it tends to be can be potentially kind of self-concern, overly self-concerned, or there could be a lot of aversion towards others, right? And so, of course, one of the hindrances being ill will, or maybe we're kind of paying too much attention, so that's kind of to oneself. These things will start to be obstructions to settling the mind and having things be more at ease. So basically, just to recap, you can reflect on these 5 qualities with respect to either the 5 hindrances or just the 3. I don't even know what they're called, like the 3 kind of roots of dukkha, greed, hatred, and delusion. You can kind of, if you look at each one of these things, stinginess with dwellings, obsession with families, obsession with material things, praise and lack of gratitude and thankfulness, you can start to see how they really sort of require components of all these obstructions. Yeah. Okay. So I hope that gives you an idea. I realize as I'm answering these that I probably took a lot of time for those first 2 questions, so I'll try to maybe go a little bit quicker. And again, if anybody has questions here, please. Oh, yes.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
The first question is, so, there's that quote where, like, when you're angry at someone, it's like, what is it, like, expecting them to drink poison, but you're the one that's harmed, right? But then anger, I feel like it can be a very helpful emotion because it informs us when like boundaries or values have been violated, and I think that like anger can incite people to put up boundaries, or it can incite people to take action on like against an injustice. So how do you reconcile those 2 schools of thought, that like one, anger can be a helpful emotion that propels us in the right direction towards of actions that we take, versus like anger being something that's unhealthy for us?
Sure. So this is one of those areas that when I was talking about before, the Buddha didn't give any sort of any wiggle room around, let's say, breaking the first precept, around killing things, living beings. he gave no wiggle room around anger. Yeah, and it's worth reflecting on that. Yeah, given what you said, right? Because you're acknowledging, hey, wait a minute. I've seen how anger in certain circumstances can help one, let's say, deal with, let's say, somebody else who's being aggressive, right? Or maybe situations that kind of like sort of having the energy to respond, right? And so you're like, what do you mean? What did he mean? That there's a number of suttas where he's very, very categorical about it. And one thing I would maybe offer you to consider is that it might be possible to respond to situations with energy but without anger. Yeah. And so what do I mean by this? So in the case of somebody, let's say somebody's, like quite literally, maybe they're like throwing punches at you, and maybe they start landing, right? So, I mean, what is anger? I mean, just in a really basic sense, often we get sort of an energy. We have this kind of mental. We start to set up a mental mode of there's an enemy, right? And you have to start to be kind of attacking towards the enemy. That's usually kind of the mode of anger, yeah. And that is a way that people sort of handle situations like that. But what would a being, let's say, just hypothetically, imagine if you didn't have fear of this other person, but you didn't have anger either. And what if they were to actually hit you, right? And just suppose, just hypothetically, suppose, your mind was actually balanced so that when the painful sensations started to, manifest, let's say in your body, it didn't get perturbed. How do you think a mind would react in a situation like that? It wasn't fearful.
Yeah, it would respond so differently because, if I'm thinking about anger, I feel like part of it is a defense mechanism, right? Because, I think, if I'm speaking for myself, it's like a form of self-protection, right? Because you don't want someone acting a certain way against you, and so, if the fear were not there, then you wouldn't feel the need, or I wouldn't feel the need to self-protect. But I'm human, and if you've been hurt enough times, wouldn't your natural instinct to be defensive?
Yeah. So this is actually part of where the Buddhist training is actually going. It's like you said, it's actually totally understandable. Like if somebody's hitting you, you're like, I either don't like the pain or don't want the body to start being hurt, right? Yeah, these are totally understandable reactions. But if the mind has developed to the point where the mind wasn't actually as attached to the body anymore, wasn't as attached to there could be another component as well, maybe. I know for myself, sometimes there might be like kind of a social pressure to present a certain image. Yeah, we don't want somebody to harm that image. Yeah, and so if the mind isn't pushing against that, yeah, then it can go, oh, this person over here is very upset, right? Whatever, they're obviously not happy. But the mind is able now to respond to the situation now without disliking the situation, able to much more clearly respond to it. And it probably would, right? Even we don't know how your mind would respond. But I haven't seen, when I just give you practical situations, it's not like, when I see people that are, let's say, I get a sense that they're spiritually developed, right? And somebody is very aggressive towards them. I don't see them getting angry. but I do see them responding, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
Yes.
that I get. I guess, like,
Yeah.
so, you know, if I speak for myself personally, like, if someone's acting aggressively towards me, like, if it's a one-off situation, like, that's easier to deal with, but, like, I guess, like, my, like, bigger question is, like, okay, so, I think Buddha would say that, you know, our inherent nature is, like, I don't know the exact words, but, like, one of emptiness, right? Like, we are, and everything, like, our thoughts and feelings and everything is clouding that inherent emptiness, right? That's my understanding of it, depending on the lineage, right? But then, on a very human level, right, like, I think most of us are operating 99% from our subconscious, right? And the subconscious is driven by all the negatively skewed things, the fear, mostly fear. And so how do you, and the fears come from, like, the things that happen to us, right? Usually from childhood, ages 0 to 7. And I mean, I guess they're getting at the same thing, because, like, when you're trying to reprogram your subconscious, you're trying to go back to that emptiness, right? Like, who you are inherently. And I think that's what Buddhism is getting at too, right? That there's this inherent emptiness within us. We're not our thoughts, and we're not our sensations and feelings. But how do you get to that emptiness when subconsciously you have these fears that were not even, like, you were not conscious of it when they were implanted in you?
So this is I think there's a question that came up a few days ago that somebody asked something like, so, you know, around this practice, like, I can understand the teachings of, for example, of letting go to a certain extent, especially intellectually.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to translate much further than that. Yeah.
Like, it's not embodied.
Yeah. So part of it. So I've been, you know, reflecting on it. I've been giving different answers. One of them I gave was to seek out people that have embodied this and spend time with them and learn from them, right? If you know of somebody, that is living this way, right? That in particular, you as you spend time with him, you see, you know, the slings of arrows, you know, of life come at them, and they don't maybe get as perturbed, or they don't get perturbed at all.
Yes.
Then you go, oh, maybe this person has something I can learn from.
Yes.
And so it's important to spend time with such people, because how we learn is sometimes we learn from speaking, and listening. A lot of times we can learn just by feeling.
Yes.
How does it feel when I'm around this person?
Yes.
And does that make sense?
Yes, that totally makes sense. I'm sorry if I'm, like, commandeering this conversation.
It's
Every
okay.
time we talk, there are more questions, and hopefully this is my last one of the sequence. But, like, so I agree with what you just said, and that is what I have been doing. And the people that I admire and look up to, who I feel like are more responsive versus reactive, would say that it's healthy for me to feel angry at people who have been unjust in my life, because I have not felt my emotions. And so is that counter to Buddhist teachings? That is what I always grapple with, that, like, I haven't processed these emotions, and maybe it is healthy for me to feel angry over the things that have happened. Like, I'm not talking about, like, oh, someone, like, cuts me in line, okay, that happens, you move on, right? But I'm talking about, like, people who are closest to you, who have, like, done, like,
I think I understand where you're getting at. A lot of times are kind of either kind of conditioning. You're talking about childhood. It could be from family or culture, who knows what, right? It can be one of basically pretending or suppressing that we have these feelings, right? So if you do actually feel angry and you don't realize it, that actually is a blocker. So in that sense, just recognizing, oh, I actually am feeling angry. That's actually important to recognize. So this is actually an aspect of, I would say, non-delusion, training ourselves to be more clear and going against delusion, be more like, what is the truth of the situation, right? But and of course the big but is that it's learning how to be aware of what's going on without feeding it. Yeah, so that's like it's a skill. It's a skill of learning how to be, how do you say, very attentive to our internal states, and recognize, is this wholesome or unwholesome, right? So if you go, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now, but this is unwholesome. Oh, that's what's going on right now, right? So how can I navigate this without encouraging it? And so it's sort of like, it's a skill. It's like, because my habit is actually to push it away, or to push it down, or pretend it's not there. So it's like almost like, you're like, wow, how do I do this? I have to like open up the box without like kind of joining the party that's coming out of the box. Yeah. So, but it's a skill, and it sounds like you're on the journey of learning this, and you probably already developed a lot of this skill. I would just say keep going, and just understand that it is a skill. It's not obvious, because like a lot of skills, a lot of times it's easier if it's like just hug that corner of the wall or hug that corner of the wall, right? But many things in the spiritual traditions, including in Buddhism, is about learning how to navigate the space in between these extremes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing. I feel like for so long on this path, like I feel like I've fallen short because it's taken me like a long time to forgive and to let go and to not be angry. But as a human, I feel like most of the time we're probably occupying the space that you're talking about. Like, how many people are actually forgiving and letting go and not being angry, like on a consistent daily basis?
Yeah. It takes effort, because it's usually not our conditioning or training or people around us. What are you talking about? I'm gonna hold on to this the day I die. I'm never forgiving that person. Yeah. That's much more the norm. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna try to answer some of the other questions. Let's see. Oh, I still had Joseph's question up. Okay. I'm not very good at using this. So if I had the screen, so we were talking here earlier about if we had a screen here, the other people would say, hey, Bhante Jagger, you actually have the old question up. But anyway. Okay. Rick asked the question, I have experienced the release and joy of dispassion. However, it has an impact on my motivation. I used to feel driven to accomplish my life goals, but I no longer yearn for most of these things. Continues. For several months, I have taken into meditation some important decisions I need to make about my future. Every time, all I have seen in my mind's eye has been a white void. Do you have any guidance? This is one of those things that I actually think would be useful for you to have an extended conversation with somebody that you trust, because my natural inclination is to ask you more questions, kind of finding out a little bit more about what's going on. But so I guess my response is maybe this might be something that's worth seeking out, somebody that you know that's trusted and wise, and having kind of a lengthy conversation. Yeah. So Victoria asked the question, good evening, Venerables. Are there any suttas where the Buddha communicates directly with beings in the animal or ghostly realms? Much metta and gratitude. Boy, I don't know the answer to this question. Does anybody in the room have an answer to this question? Yes, Elliot.
Well, I think there's sutta where I don't know which one where the Buddha deals with like angry yakshas or something like that. That's not really the lower realm. That's like the undesirable higher realm.
Yeah.
There's the sutta that I was told about where Mahamoggallana and the Buddha see a ghost that's being pecked by birds who's a butcher in a past life. Right.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe somebody in the chat, they can, if they know, they can answer that. Okay. Whole bunch of people have been saying hello, and I say hello to everybody. Let's see. This is Richard responding to Rick. I can relate a little bit in your situation. I suffered from mental health problems in 2023, and as a result, I felt dispassion to entertainment, but after my recovery, I was confused. Okay. Kuma has a question. Bhante, in terms of the 5 aggregates, can you please explain the beings in other realms with only 4 devas, 3, and 2 aggregates? I can't explain the beings in other realms with only 4, 3, and 2 aggregates. Maybe if you can give me a little bit more, is there a sutta that you're referring to, Kumu? Maybe we can talk about that. So if you have a particular sutta in mind, I can read that and we can talk a little bit more. Okay. Let's see, going to more questions. There's a response actually from Norma. Metta from South Florida. Okay, this is regarding anger, the question around anger. Anger, such a tough topic. Tough hindrance, tough poison. Practice, practice, practice. I see and feel the difference, but it's never enough if it still shows up. And there's lots of Anjalis and smiles and so. Okay. Wow. Actually, I got through. I thought there would be a lot more questions, so that's why I was kind of, going quickly. But are there any other questions here in the room?
I have a comment first. I think the 4 aggregates, when I talk to my friend, things like that, like beings in the formless realms,
Mm-hmm.
I think are maybe beings without like rupa. I don't.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember the ones with less, but I think there's one with just 1 aggregate.
Yeah. This is my memory again. I'm always reluctant to, sannyas and icha, right? My memory is that even like in the some of these higher realms, like rupa, it's not like absent. It's just a kind of like it's more subtle, a more subtle substance. And you mentioned the formless realms. I'm not exactly sure how that works. So, but Angela, you had another question? Yes.
How does one? Is it possible to demonstrate compassion towards someone while maintaining very strict boundaries?
Can you give an example of what you mean?
Let's say you decide to go like no contact with someone for like your mental and emotional health, and that's not what the person desires.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, are you being compassionate towards the other person who wants you in your life?
So the motivation compassion is basically one around. It's kind of the how I describe it is the kind of openness to being with the pain and suffering of others. Yeah, and so. On one level, you can think, well, because I'm, let's say, cutting off communication with a person, that might be seen as uncompassionate. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important to kind of have a broader view. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so there's probably reasons for cutting off, right? And so, without knowing the specifics, if the reasons are, let's say, based in compassion, right? It's recognizing that, boy, if I'm involved with this person, it seems to actually just be increasing the suffering between maybe both of us, right?
Yeah.
So actually, it might be a very compassionate response to say, okay, because you might think in the long run this is actually going to be helpful for both of us, right? So it's always important not to maybe, kind of dwell too much on the specifics, like whether you speak with the person, you not speak with the person, but actually just keep coming back to what are my kind of just asking yourself, like, what am I being driven by, right? Am I cutting out communication because of, let's say, I just don't want to deal with this person anymore, which is aversion, right? Or I want to, like I said, don't want to communicate with this person anymore because over time I found actually this is creating a lot of suffering for both of us, right? Do you kind of see the difference? So it's less about kind of the specific choices we make, and I would just encourage you to kind of just reflect on what's going on here, yeah, and not, don't be maybe the encouragement is, we're going to be trying things, and sometimes we make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's okay. And you just, okay, that course didn't go well, let's try this one. Okay, that didn't work, let's try something else. Yeah. So.
I think like what I struggle with is
Mhm.
like feeling like I'm not doing things correctly when I try to honor myself and like the fact that I'm very human and like I want to protect my mental and emotional health, because then I feel like I'm not being compassionate, or I'm not letting go, or I'm not forgiving. Like I feel like it's a moral letdown or something, if that makes sense.
I think I struggled. Can you say that a different way? I struggled to understand.
Okay, so like Buddhism will say like, forgiveness is really important, right?
Mhm.
Like to let go and forgive other people, and the reality is like there are people in my life I haven't fully forgiven yet, right?
Mhm.
And so because I haven't forgiven them, but I feel like the gold standard is to like let go and forgive. I feel like I'm like morally failing.
Oh, right. Did you forgive yourself for not letting go?
So does everything stem from the self? Like, does forgiveness stem from the self? Does compassion stem from the self? Because if that's the case, then I would feel better about like maintaining boundaries with other people, because it comes from a place of self-compassion, because I don't want to keep inducing suffering upon myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, related with my last response. It's okay to try things, and a lot of times we'll do things, and it's like, hey, this is actually working better than it was before.
Yeah.
But then you're like, but it's not, doesn't feel like it's like great and but you recognize this is an improvement, right? And it's actually important to recognize it. Oh, this is something more skillful, right? This is something that's more beneficial, right? That's a win, right? There might be more skillful and wholesome like avenues, but again, this is why it's a practice, right? It's not, it's sort of like any skill. I mean, take things like that we do without even thinking about it, like walking, right? There are professional athletes that actually I was talking with Ian the other day that like these he's talking about a hikers that can walk like 40 miles a day. It's like we're like, what? They probably, the way they walk, right, is probably very trained, right? They probably really like analyze how they make corrections and keep trying to improve things, and I'm sure there's all sorts of things, right? And it's kind of the same way. So like when we're let's say navigating how to relate to others, right? We're going to develop skills, and then we're going to learn, and then we're going to try again. Yeah. So chalk up the wins. Yeah. Go like, okay, there's definitely things that learn and improve, but realize there might be kind of additional improvements to be made. Just like professional athletes, they don't just stop with the first year of training. They're like training all the time. So in the same way, we're training. Okay, how do we be more skillful? Internally, be more skillful, and externally, be more skillful. Yeah. These are good questions. Okay, Thinner.
Have you worked with like doubt? doubt, and then another thing is how can you also cultivate like patience?
Okay, so how do you work with doubt? Would you be willing to share a little more details with the doubt, just so I can have a little bit more idea what you're referring to?
Well, I guess the doubt has to do with like some sort of like fear, kind of like earlier saying something like that, right? It's just more of like kind of, I guess, like fear of like the future, and it's connected with, like they're both connected. Yeah, like I just keep, I guess, like what's proliferating that is, you know, like putting myself kind of like moving myself away from the present moment and just like, you know, just thinking in my head of just like, future or even the past. But like I'm trying to remind myself like, you know, take things step by step. Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you, but it doesn't feel like
Oh, yeah.
like it. Like I feel like
You're looking for a particular experience or feeling?
maybe, and it's just really like hindering me. But you know, I'm doing different things like chanting, like exclusive chanting.
Okay.
And I'm just reflecting like these are just like some cards.
Right.
Or some permanent.
Right. Sometimes with experiences, especially like kind of the afflictive emotions, we were talking about anger. Like, you know, the Buddha, you know, gave, like I said, no sort of a quarter for anger. But many of the kind of the great teachers have kind of, I don't say, warned against trying to go too quickly to the, how do you say, the solution, if that makes any sense. A lot of times we may be actually exercising aversion without realizing it. And it's actually important to get a sense of not just whatever the afflictive emotion is, but also how is our mind responding to it, right? So let's say there is like a lot of thoughts and maybe worry about the future or maybe things about the past. And there can also be kind of reactions to that, right? Don't want that, you know, I shouldn't be thinking that, yeah? And then reactions to that too, yeah, it's like, okay, gotta practice this way, and I should do, you know, and so it's actually important to start to get a sense, what is our mind doing, right? What does our mind want? It's usually not just one thing, it's usually like a constellation. There'll be something that comes up and then something else comes up. And so what we want to do is learn how to practice being still, right? Going back to our meditation object and just getting a sense of what are all the different things our mind is doing. It's going through this and then this and this. So we need to actually spend some time just, okay, wow, there's a lot of thinking, and then there's a lot of like, gotta get rid of this thinking, gotta change this thinking, yeah? And then there's another part that's like, gotta get rid of this wanting to change the thinking. You know, there can be like reactions that are, you know, that is normal, yeah? Yeah, and so it's important to just learn how to slow down and just get a sense of what's going on. And sometimes we need to spend a lot of time doing that. Yeah.
Okay. So with what you just said, thank you for that, Wendy. And so earlier you said like the Buddha has said to not really leave wiggle room for like emotional thoughts or your like impulsiveness kind of thing, reacting, because that's like what we're kind of used to do. So I guess that's when like sometimes I'll be like reactive of like, oh, I'm not supposed to have these thoughts.
Right.
If I let these thoughts like be there, then it might right? I look great.
Hmm.
Um,
Which is true. Yeah.
So I guess it kind of also goes back to like when you were telling Angela like how to be skillful with this.
Hmm.
I sometimes feel like I'm just trying to figure it out like by myself.
Yeah.
But yeah. I can say that.
You know, one of the things I've found very helpful about becoming a monk and spending time living in monasteries is that you'll sometimes be with people, or in the case of other monastics, that are just get to a lot. You learn a lot from being around them, right? And there's one monk I'm thinking about that. I lived with them for a number of years, and it's pretty normal. And I say this, a lot of times people think, you go to the monastery and everybody's just blissed out and cloud nine, and it's like actually you find out monastics are a lot like just normal people, because they are just for the most part just like normal people, right? That's where they come in, right? Just because we take on robes to go through a ceremony doesn't mean that, as the saying goes, our greed, hatred, and delusion suddenly vanishes. We just now have robes with greed, hatred, and delusion, And so you'll see a lot of monks doing their best, but still being human, right? Still acting in kind of interesting ways, around each other, and maybe it can be dramatic. Being in monastery sometimes. But I'm thinking about this one monk that, kind of no matter what somebody else is doing, no matter how much kind of kerfluffle is being created, it's not that he actually recognizes it. He's okay. He just goes about his business and just exits. He doesn't push anything away. It's not like he doesn't not acknowledge. He's not like the kind of keeping the blinders on. Just like, okay, just smiles, okay. But I'm not going to get caught with this. There's this monk that's maybe going through a lot of dukkha, right? And they're acting out in unskillful ways. Okay, that's okay. I'm just going to acknowledge that. Maybe if I can help, I'll help. But otherwise, I'll move on. Yeah, and we can learn a lot from that, because this is actually a modeling of how we can kind of understand how to maybe at one response to our own internal world. Yeah, that's like, okay, right now the mind maybe is unskillful. This is not good. That's good, recognizing that. Or maybe our response to it is also, maybe it's it's wholesome, but it's maybe also kind of bound up with a lot of aversion. It's like, oh wow, that's okay. It's okay. So how do we? Right now, this is how it feels. How do we just respond? Moving on. Don't don't get entangled with it. Don't. It's like you ever see like one of these bushes that just has all these branches and it's really gnarly, and if you try to walk in it, you just get all cut up, and it's like that. Sometimes our internal world with its likes and dislikes and thoughts and memories are like that. It's a big bunch of tangled bushes, yeah? Don't jump in it. Just, okay, that's that. But, you don't need to, do anything about it. Just walk around it. Yeah? So it's not necessarily easy, because our habits want to keep jumping into the or maybe we don't jump into it. Maybe we get the I hate these bushes, and you get the flamethrower and you start trying to burn everything down, and then more bushes pop up. You just, okay, this isn't working. We got to just stop and slow down. Just walk around it. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why it's quite helpful if we can find people in our lives that we see as stable, calm, right? Life throws all sorts of things at them, and they don't get perplexed and confused. They just respond, they move on. Because then we're learning, oh, how does that work? How do they do that, right? Because it's not something you can really kind of talk about. You just have to see and feel it. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay. There's probably some questions in the chat. Let's see here. Richard. Okay. Rick, as a follow-up question, part of the issue is that after 42 years of practice, I have grown. I naturally have let go of many things that used to feel driven to accomplish. I feel a quiet joy and contentment with how things are. At the same time, I am very impaired by illness, financial limitations, and being isolated. So here's the question. Are there ways to generate more determination or resolve in the practice that might give meaning and direction to my future life goals? I mean, there are many practices of the sort of teachings, and I'm sure you've read about them. You've probably tried many out. One practice that I found myself coming back to kind of over and over is the reflections of death, and in particular Well, let me backtrack. Let me describe how I used to initially start practicing with this as a layperson. I'd often walk from place to place around where I used to live, and sometimes take walks that took 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And what I'd start doing is, so usually when you walk, especially in a city, things are demarcated by blocks, right? I would start at one edge of a block, and let's say I'm walking through several blocks, and I would bring up in my mind, okay, when I get to the end of this block, I'm going to die. And I really do my best to really imagine that, like, this is it. This is the last however minute long of my life, and really bring that up, bring it really conscious, and then I just start walking, and I just keep bringing that up as I walk and I walk and I walk. And then when I get to the end, it's like, okay, this is it. And then it's like, okay, I'm still here, okay? And then I do it again. Next block, okay, at this block, again, just bring it up again. At the end, and I just practice that, yeah? And the reason I bring that up is, of course, the classical way that the Buddha taught, that he said that a sort of a practitioner who's practicing well will actually reflect on death with each breath coming in and out. Yeah. And the reason why I give that example is, this is where I started. It's like, okay, practicing with reflection of death with each in and out breath, that seems a little hard right now. So I want to work my kind of way up to that, right? But what it also did is it gave me a kind of like a little bit longer than let's say a breath might come in and out in a few seconds. And it gave me some time to kind of collect myself, right? And it gave me some clear marker, right? Like an external kind of way of navigating, because you can imagine, like, I don't know, like, okay, at the end of this block, there's going to be this car that's going to hit me or something like that. And, something to kind of, give it a little bit more meat or a little bit more kind of substance to it, yeah? So I found that, reflections on death, and there's a, practical example how to start, but there's many ways of doing it, has actually been a helpful thing for me. So I would just, why don't you give that some thought or consideration, you have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Yes, Elliot.
So do you think the primary purpose for the at least the example of recollecting back with every breath is for heedfulness? Is it for like awareness of like non-self and impermanence, that we're not the same person moment after moment? How do you use that to inspire your practice?
Mm. Well, I think those two observations are really good. You know, one of the things before I answer the question is want to say, I think it actually is really useful to reflect when we have a question about something, or we like read a sutta or something like that. It's actually good to kind of think about it. Like, why did the Buddha say this? Is it really only these things, or like, you know, what's going? Because it's actually that kind of you know, it's like a chewing on something. When you eat something, right, and you just gulp it down, you know, you get some nourishment, but you don't get nearly as much nourishment as when you chew it. You know, when you really chew it, and you know, you're getting all the saliva, and you're breaking the food down. Now it goes down your digestive system. Your digestive system is like, oh, thank you. It's so much easier to process, right? I don't know if that's how it works, but it's a nice story, right? So I think it's really worth, like, you know, like, oh, like how, yeah, why is it, what? And because what you said to me makes a lot of sense, you know, and there's probably many other reasons why the Buddha encouraged the reflection of that, especially with every cycle of breathing. For myself, I think the things that I found it help with, kind of, especially like in a short-term basis, is that it helps kind of sift things away. What I mean by sift, like if there's any kind of, let's say, dominant, maybe negative emotion or dominant kind of thought pattern, it just sort of helps it go, okay, is this really important? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of times our minds can think something is important, but when you go, well, if I only have about another minute left to live, is it really that important? You know? Yeah, it's really worth asking ourselves. And kind of one of the questions before was on forgiveness. I remember, you know, sometimes thinking like, boy, you know, if I was going to die, do I really want to hold on to this grudge? And it was also, you know, and a lot of times, of course, no. That was interesting. Sometimes the mind would say yes. Mm-hmm. We're like, whoa, what is that about? Mm-hmm. Right? And we get to investigate. Well, what's going on here? It's like, wow, the mind is really clinging tight to this one, you know. Oh boy, you know, don't you want to have like some peace? No, I don't want peace. You know, like what's going? Whoa. Yeah.
I used to always ask Bhakti Jay this.
Yeah.
I don't know who or what is asking exactly, but we always say the mind says yes. But what's the mind and what's not the mind that sees the mind saying yes? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Isn't it the mind saying that another part of the mind is saying yes?
Yeah.
There's this weird belief system that's in that.
The part of the way we talk about it, I think, you know, I guess it goes into that. I don't want to get too into it, but that kind of subject-object dichotomy and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's very inherent in our language, yeah, and how we describe things. But we need to have some way of talking about this stuff, yeah. You know. It's like, there's no subject, there's no object. Can I talk? No, you can't say anything. Like, it's just phenomenon. Phenomenon. Yeah. Yeah. We. I don't know. It's okay to talk about stuff. Yes, Angela.
So, in response to Mary's question, you had mentioned the importance of slowing down and like the importance of like reflecting, and even when you were answering my question, you were talking about how like the first step is awareness, and awareness is cultivated when you slow down and you like think about like what is driving your like actions and reactions, right? So like the process of slowing down is very important. At least like that's what I've discovered for myself. And I think what I struggle with sometimes, and I've gotten better at this, but I struggle with the fact that like we operate in a society that rewards people for being fast paced, and in connection with some of, I don't know if I fully understood some of the questions that were being asked, but I think that, you know, people touched on like not being as ambitious as they were, right? And so how do you how do you honor the process of slowing down when that's what leads to like more self-awareness and self-understanding, when the rest of the world doesn't reward you for that and doesn't operate in this way?
Yeah. Well, it's good to spend time with people that do, you know, value this. Yeah, yeah. Because, yeah, you know, if we spend too much time with people, let's say, that are just basically following their greed, hatred, and delusion, then it influences us. It's just how we're. The way I describe it is that we're social animals, or I know people don't necessarily like to sometimes hear that, but we're kind of like herd creatures, right? We do generally, you know, there's exceptions. We generally do what everybody else does, right? And this helps us maybe survive better as a species. But yeah, it's so we got to understand this is our kind of a lot of our habitual tendencies, our programming per se. And it's important to recognize that, and so, you know, spending time with people, as much time as you can, that are living wholesome, skillful lives, consciously, you know, spending time with such people. We can't avoid, you know, there's always going to be people doing all sorts of things, people saying all sorts of things, people, you know, giving the absolute worst advice, and you know, thinking they're actually giving the best advice, and you know, whatever. It's just the world is how it is. Yeah. So, just kind of, I was talking with Thinnery about, you know, these bushes that are full of thorns and you know, branches, and you know, things that are really painful. We just have to recognize it and walk around it and keep moving on. Yeah. Expecting the world to not have that can be an entanglement. Yeah, it's just this is just how the world is. Whether we're here or not, whether we act skillfully or unskillfully, there are going to be people saying the darndest things. Yeah, and so it's upon us to go, okay, no matter what I do, even if I was the most powerful, charismatic, skillful, everything you can think of person, there'll still be all sorts of people out there saying the darndest things. It's impossible to fully control. So we just do what we can and move on. So the main thing is recognizing, oh, okay, this is, you know, probably unskillful. I should minimize my time. Doesn't mean we need, you know, part of like the disentangling doesn't mean like we start, hey, you shouldn't be saying that. You get an argument with them. You know, I mean, getting an argument with somebody is usually a sign that we're starting to get entangled. Yeah. And so at that point, it's, you know, it's like, okay, you know, but if somebody's starting to say things that are unskillful, you just ask her, do I really need to be here? Right. Sometimes we need to be here because maybe it's a work commitment or maybe a family situation. Then we start thinking about, can we minimize the time in the situation, right? Is there a way that I can add something to this that helps the conversation change? Can I add something kind of out of left field? You know, sometimes You can just, I really got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Just anything, Hey, is that a cat? We have a monastery cat here named Teddy. So sometimes, we just have to start being creative. Yeah, find ways of navigating it, and then we go, okay, how can I spend more and more time with skillful, wholesome people, and hopefully also people that raise our, spirits and raise our kind of sense of happiness and well-being. Yeah. Elliot.
I have a pretty specific question.
Okay.
I don't know how much of your monastic journey or even before you spent like studying under teachers, but you can talk about like these great practitioners you respect. Do you know like under what circumstances you really respect someone's advice, but you kind of go with your intuition that I don't think that what they told me is what's most skillful right now? And what situations where your intuition is like, I don't think that could be right, but you know what, because I respect this practitioner so much, I'm still going to try their advice anyway.
Oh yeah, both. So basically, I've been in a lot of teachers who say, hey, consider this, and I listen to them, and I say, well, let me go back and reflect on it. I reflect on it, and I go, well, no, still going to do this, or maybe kind of. I wanted to do this thing. This respected teacher says this. Maybe I decide that I'm not doing it. Yeah. So I've done both. Yeah. Actually, I remember one lay teacher I was talking to about monasticism, and he responded to me. He's like, "You don't want to do that. Just go to this meditation center over here. Go practice for a while." I thought he was so. Yeah, I remember he was so confident about that answer, and I remember reflecting on that later and going, actually, there was truth to that, to what he was saying, because I think he was recognizing, one of the things that we can see with like a changing situation. Let's say, hey, I want to become a monk, right? Sometimes our motivation can be around, let's say, like kind of changing the scenery, or we're bored of whatever we're doing, so we want to do something. It can be all sorts of motivation. So, like I was saying before, just becoming a monk doesn't mean your greed, hatred, and delusion go away, right? You just get robes, and now you have to navigate your greed, hatred, and delusion. And hopefully, what monastics can do, give you kind of a better supporting conditions, kind of saying you get to meet people that are very well practiced, right? And kind of lots and lots of reminders of what you should be doing, yeah. But it's not there's no sort of 100% solution. So it's I've done, so the answer to your specific question, yeah, I've done both, where I've basically both heeded advice and not heeded advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I was more just looking to ask it and looking to hear feedback. At times I'll give away my own discernment and volition, and then there's other times where I'll ignore advice I get from multiple practitioners, and I have in my mind valid reasons why. And then at a certain point I realize, oh, they were telling me something that I was prior to blind to, so it made sense to me that they were right.
Yeah.
And so it's always something that I just try to chew on and get closer to the second.
Yeah. When you're getting the same response from multiple people, it doesn't it's not necessarily one of these things like it must be true. But for me, I start to take it more seriously. Same advice, 3 people, 4 people. You're like, Again, part of the thing is that aspect of delusion. That's actually why it's so difficult, because it's part of delusion where it's the mind is sort of fooling itself, and so that's often where kind of that willingness to slow down, the willingness to give decisions a lot of time, the willingness to go, well, what if they're right? You know, there's also if we're one, maybe somebody's really prone to doubting. Maybe the opposite is actually true. What if I'm right? Right? There's different. People have different temperaments, right? So it's a good question. Yeah. I think this is where the interplay between faith and wisdom is really important. So these are both qualities the Buddha said we absolutely need to develop, right? Faith, and in particular faith, and the training of the Buddha, the well-practiced teachers, yeah, the qualities that the Buddha exemplified, but also this quality of wisdom. And there's a number of teachers that actually point to wisdom as not so, can be seen as a noun, but it's maybe more useful to be seen as a verb, and the verb being discernment, right? Because it's an active thing. So you get better at wisdom, or you get better at discerning, right? So it's not like you collect more wisdom points. It's more like you're getting more and more skilled at discerning things and how to navigate things. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Question. Bhante, I have seen the practice moving in the right direction when I consciously think about the faith for Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Your thoughts? Keep going. Kuma, why don't you maybe respond with a little more detail? Maybe I'm missing kind of more of what you're asking about. But to me, I would say if something is, if there's more wholesome states of mind or more skillful states of mind that result in this practice, keep doing it. Don't stop. Just because it's starting to work. Okay, you got to stop. It's working. No, keep going. Okay. Next question. Rick says, Bhante, can you share a few of the meaningful experiences on your journey as a monk, which have been important to your path? When I was a junior monk, living at Abhayagiri Monastery, even before that, when I was a lay person, and later an anagarika, and then later samanera, and of course later a bhikkhu. There was a small shrine in the forest, a kind of a common path, along a common path that many of the people that lived there took to get to their cabins or kutis, as we call them. And I would pass by this kind of small shrine. And one of the things about this shrine is that it was basically encouraging the reflection of anicca. And kind of the point, we can understand anicca means impermanence, means change. And that makes sense, things change, right? But one of the interesting things that happened as I walked by the shrine day in and day out, something started to actually maybe operate a little bit lower than just the kind of intellectual discursive part of the thinking. Because one day my emotions would be one way, I might be very bored, and the next day I walk by and I'd be very upset about something that happened, and the next day I walk by and I might be feeling very peaceful, and the next day I walk by and I might be agitated about something, the next day I walk by I might be bored again, who knows. After doing this day in and day out, something a little bit deeper was like, emotions are impermanent, right? So it's one thing to say it, right? To repeat what somebody says. It's another thing to something a little bit lower, starting to understand it a little bit more, right? And so this is the kind of I use a story maybe as a kind of maybe an encouragement. It sounds so simple, right? But we can repeat stuff. We can say the same things that somebody else says, kind of like a parrot, right? And that's some amount of understanding, but learning it just takes time. And so we just have to keep doing it and keep doing it. And it sounds like, oh yeah, that's what they talk about impermanence. Yeah, things change. And then a little bit later, it's like something else. Oh yeah, that changed thing. Yeah, the Buddha might know something. Yeah, right. So I'm using kind of humor just this kind of illustrate that our whatever you want to call it, our mind, the different parts of our mind, our mental constructs there. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes perseverance, but these things can be learned. Yeah. So we just encourage all of you to keep practicing. Yeah. Dear Bhante, was there a defining moment or turning point whereby you knew you wanted to ordain, that you were ready? Maybe I'll talk about before I ordained, and that was actually the time where I was a layperson, and I was not sure whether I wanted to at least look into monasticism, to sort of, because I was deciding whether I should quit my job and kind of leave kind of lay life, at least temporarily, behind and actually spend time at monasteries. Okay, and what I did was I was living in Massachusetts at the time, and I found a place that had these, they're actually meant for self-retreats, these cabins, in the forest, and I rented one out for basically a couple weeks and spent a couple of weeks out there practicing and living out there, and I remember when I got there, it was like I ended up getting really sick. So it was an interesting time because I was so sick that I realized that I needed to maybe I had maybe these ambitions to have a very kind of strict practice schedule, and I realized I should probably be good not to give myself a little breathing room here, just to try to stay relatively healthy while I was out in the woods by myself, and I just did my best of not thinking about whether I should do this. I should start to go and spend time at monasteries and potentially become a monk, or I should go back to just being a normal layperson. Okay, I'm not thinking about that. Of course, my mind did think about that, but I kept practicing and just later. I'm just going to be with feelings of the body, right? This is how the feet feel. And this is what I'm doing. Okay, just be with the meditation, right? And by the end of my time there, I actually wasn't even thinking about whether or not, I was going to pursue this or not. it was actually only till I was leaving and I actually ended up getting a ride from somebody, and they were very curious over where I was, and I was asking all these questions. In the process of answering their questions, it just became clear to me that, oh, I do want to do this. I do want to, try out going to monasteries. So for me, the kind of lesson of that is that we can make decisions about things without, like, we don't have to really think about it that much. And we just have to be willing to, acknowledge there's a question, something we're trying to make a decision about. If there's any practical things to kind of learn that, but that usually doesn't take too much time. And then just be willing to train oneself to be calm and still, and give yourself or maybe train yourself to be willing to accept whatever might come out of this process. Yeah? Which is usually, at least at that time, I remember being probably the scariest part. It's like being with that unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. It's like, what? I want to know what's going to happen. Tell me. No, tell me what's going to happen. I want to know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. So, it's getting close to the end. So, if there's one more quick question, otherwise we maybe can wrap things up. Okay. Maybe we'll end it there. So I want to thank everybody for joining us on a Friday night. A bunch of people coming online to talk about Buddhism and helping ourselves become happier and more peaceful people. Like I don't know. This is pretty cool. Yeah. I know maybe not everybody thinks it's cool, but think about it. Friday night, people here at the monastery, other people tuning in on YouTube. I think that's pretty cool. Okay. All right. Some people are like, I don't know this guy. Okay, I don't know this guy's talking about. Okay, we'll end it here. Let's give 3 sadhus. Okay. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I realize I have kind of a corny personality. Let's go ahead and pay respects to the. Oh wait, we actually should end the stream before we do that, because otherwise, it's good for you at home to pay respects to the Buddha too. But for our viewers, we're going to say goodbye, and I was glad for have you all here. Okay, good. End stream.